The summer air hung heavy with the scent of roses as the sun began to set behind the Harrington estate. The mansion, a sprawling testament to wealth that sat on 30 acres of manicured gardens, buzzed with activity as staff moved efficiently through its halls. Tonight was Sophia Harrington's graduation celebration, and nothing less than perfection would do. At 18, Sophia had the world at her fingertips. As the only daughter of tech mogul Richard Harrington, she had never known what it meant to want for anything. Her childhood bedroom was larger than most apartments. Her closet held clothes she'd worn only once. And her future, secured by her father's billions and her acceptance to an Ivy League university, stretched before her like a golden road. "Miss Sophia, your guests will be arriving in an hour. Your father asked if you're ready." Mrs. Chen stood at the doorway of Sophia's suite, her hands clasped in front of her crisp uniform, as the head housekeeper for the past 12 years. Mrs. Chen had watched Sophia grow from a spoiled child into a slightly less spoiled young woman. Sophia turned from her vanity mirror, diamond earrings catching the light as she moved. "Tell him I'll be down soon." "Is everything set up by the pool?" "Yes, miss. The caterers are finishing now and the band is setting up in the garden pavilion." Sophia nodded, already turning back to her reflection. She barely registered Mrs. Chen's quiet exit, too busy examining her appearance. Her dress had cost more than what most people made in a month, but money had never been something Sophia thought much about. It simply existed like air or water, always available when needed. 3 hours later, the party was in full swing. 200 of Philadelphia's elite mingled on the Harrington's back terrace and around the Olympic-sized pool, where floating candles drifted lazily across the surface. Young men in expensive suits laughed too loudly at their own jokes, while girls Sophia had known since preschool huddled together. Taking selfies they would post with captions about forever friends, despite barely tolerating each other. Sophia drifted between groups, accepting congratulations and compliments with practiced grace. But underneath her perfect smile, a familiar emptiness gnawed at her. These weren't real friends, they were connections, social obligations, people who saw her last name before they saw her face. There's the graduate, ready to take Harvard by storm. Thomas Baldwin, son of her father's business partner, approached with 2 champagne flutes. Sophia accepted the drink with a practiced smile. "Yale, actually." Right, Yale." Thomas didn't look embarrassed by his mistake. Why would he? In their world, details about other people rarely mattered. "Your father must be proud, following in his footsteps and all that." "He's thrilled," Sophia lied, taking a sip of champagne. Her father had barely mentioned her acceptance. Too busy with the latest acquisition his company was pursuing. After 20 minutes of mind-numbing conversation about Thomas's new sports car, Sophia excused herself, claiming she needed to check on something in the house. The relief of escaping the noise and forced laughter was immediate, as she stepped through the French doors into the cool, quiet interior of the mansion. She wandered through the house, heels clicking against marble floors, past rooms filled with expensive furniture that rarely felt the weight of actual people. The Harrington home was more museum than house, designed to impress rather than comfort. Sophia found herself in the East Wing, drawn to the music room her mother had insisted on including when they'd built the house 15 years ago, before she'd decided a charity foundation in Africa was more fulfilling than being a wife and mother. The room had remained largely untouched since her departure, a grand piano sitting silently by floor-to-ceiling windows, catching the last golden rays of sunlight. As she approached the doorway, Sophia froze. Someone was already in the room, a boy around her age, tall and slender, standing by the piano with his back to her. His hand hovered over the keys, not quite touching them. "What are you doing in here?" Sophia demanded, her voice sharper than she'd intended. The boy jumped and spun around, eyes wide. He wore black pants and a white button-up shirt, the uniform of the catering staff her father had hired for the event. But Sophia recognized him after a moment. Not catering staff. This was Mrs. Chen's son. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't be here," he said quickly, already moving toward the door. "I was just delivering extra towels to the guest rooms and I saw the piano. You're Mrs. Chen's boy, right?" Sophia blocked his exit, curiosity replacing her initial annoyance. She'd seen him around the grounds occasionally over the years, but had never paid much attention. Why would she? He nodded, his discomfort obvious. "Elijah, my mom is the housekeeper." I know who your mom is. Sophia studied him more closely. He was handsome in a quiet way, with thoughtful eyes that seemed older than his years. Do you play? She nodded toward the piano. Elijah shook his head too quickly. No, I mean, not really. I should get back to helping my mom. You must play something, Sophia pressed, suddenly entertained by his obvious discomfort. The evening had been so painfully boring, and here was something interesting at last. You were looking at it like it was made of gold. I've just always thought it was beautiful, Elijah admitted, glancing back at the gleaming black grand piano. It's a Steinway Model D, one of the finest concert grands ever made. Sophia raised an eyebrow, surprised by his knowledge. Impressive. How do you know that? Elijah shrugged. I read about pianos sometimes. Well, now you have to play something, Sophia decided, walking over to the piano and lifting the fall board to reveal the keys. I insist. Miss Harrington, I really should. Sophia, she corrected. And I'm not asking you to perform a concerto. Just play something. Anything. It'll be fun. She smiled, but there was a challenge in her eyes. This was how Sophia had always been, used to getting her way, to people doing what she asked simply because she asked it. Elijah hesitated, looking from Sophia to the piano and back again. She could see the longing in his eyes, the way his fingers twitched slightly at his sides. Your guests will be wondering where you are. He tried one last time. Sophia waved away his concern. They're all too busy trying to impress each other to notice I'm gone. Come on, just one song. I'm bored out of my mind at my own party. Something in her admission seemed to surprise him. Perhaps it was the flash of honesty, the brief glimpse behind her perfect facade. Sophia wasn't sure why she'd said it, only that something about this quiet boy made her want to be slightly more real than usual. After what seemed like an eternal internal debate, Elijah slowly approached the piano. He sat down on the bench, adjusting it with the familiarity of someone who knew exactly how far from the keys he should be. I don't play very well, he warned, but his hands were already hovering over the keys with unmistakable comfort. I'll be the judge of that, Sophia said, leaning against the piano with an amused smile. She expected him to plunk out chopsticks or fumble through heart and soul. It would be entertaining to watch the housekeeper's son pretend to be something he wasn't. Elijah took a deep breath, closed his eyes for a moment, and then his fingers touched the keys. What happened next was so unexpected that Sophia nearly lost her balance against the piano. The opening notes of Claude Debussy's Clair de Lune filled the room, not the simplified version found in beginner piano books, but the full, complex piece played with astonishing sensitivity. Sophia stared at Elijah's hands as they moved across the keys with practiced precision. His entire demeanor had changed. The nervous, apologetic boy had vanished, replaced by someone confident and completely absorbed in the music. His body swayed slightly with the rhythm, his face transformed by an expression of pure concentration and joy. The piece built gradually, Elijah's fingers dancing across the keys with increasing intensity, drawing out emotions that seemed impossible from someone so young. The delicate trills, the powerful crescendos, every note was perfect. But more than that, it was deeply felt. Sophia couldn't move, couldn't speak. She had heard this piece performed by professional pianists at concert halls in New York and Paris, but never had it sounded quite like this, so honest and vulnerable. As the final notes faded into silence, Elijah's hands hovered above the keys for a moment before slowly returning to his lap. He blinked as if waking from a dream, and the self-conscious boy returned. That's all I know, he said quietly, already starting to rise from the bench. Wait. Sophia's voice came out barely above a whisper. Where did you learn to play like that? Elijah looked down at his hands. I don't really know. Sophia, there you are. A girl's voice broke the moment as Becca Collins, Sophia's closest friend, though that wasn't saying much, appeared in the doorway. Everyone's looking for you. Your dad wants to make a toast. She paused, noticing Elijah. What's going on? Sophia opened her mouth but found herself at a loss for words. How could she explain what she'd just witnessed? Nothing, Elijah answered for her, standing quickly. Excuse me. He slipped past Becca and disappeared down the hallway before Sophia could stop him. Was that the housekeeper's kid? Becca asked, wrinkling her nose slightly. What was he doing in here? Sophia stared after him, Her world tilted on its axis. "Playing piano," she said simply, knowing Becca would never understand the significance of what she'd just heard. "Well, come on. Your dad's waiting, and Tyler brought his brother who's visiting from London. He's gorgeous and apparently single." Becca tugged at her arm. Sophia allowed herself to be led back to the party, but her mind remained in the music room with the unexpected melody and the boy who had brought it to life. For the first time in as long as she could remember, Sophia Harrington found herself truly surprised. And something told her that her carefully planned life was about to take an unexpected turn. Sophia moved through the rest of her graduation party like a sleepwalker. She smiled when appropriate, thanked guests for their congratulations, and even laughed at her father's toast about her future success. But her mind kept drifting back to the music room and the unexpected talent she had discovered there. "Earth to Sophia." Becca waved a hand in front of her face. "You've been staring at your champagne for like 5 minutes. What's going on with you tonight?" They were sitting at one of the tables near the pool, surrounded by the soft glow of string lights and the gentle splash of the fountain. The party had reached that point in the evening where ties were loosened and laughter grew louder as drinks flowed freely. "Sorry," Sophia said, forcing herself to focus. "Just thinking about college, I guess." Becca rolled her eyes. "Please, Yale doesn't start for months. Tonight is about celebrating." She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Tyler's brother keeps looking at you." He asked if you were seeing anyone. Under normal circumstances, Sophia might have been interested. Tyler's family owned half the real estate in downtown Philadelphia, and his older brother had recently been featured in a magazine article about promising young entrepreneurs. But tonight she couldn't bring herself to care. "I'm not really in the mood," she said, standing up. "I think I need some air." "We're literally outside," Becca pointed out. But Sophia was already walking away. She found herself drawn back to the house, to the east wing, to the music room where the piano sat in shadows now. Sophia turned on a single lamp, casting a warm glow over the Steinway. She ran her fingers lightly across the keys, pressing one note that hung in the air like a question. How had the housekeeper's son learned to play like that, and why was he hiding his talent? Sophia had never given much thought to the lives of the people who worked for her family. They existed on the periphery of her world, making beds, preparing meals, and maintaining the grounds before disappearing to wherever they went when not needed. She realized with a pang of discomfort that she'd never wondered where Mrs. Chen and her son lived, what they did in their free time, or what dreams they might have. "Miss Sophia," she turned to see Mrs. Chen standing in the doorway, a look of concern on her face. "Your father is looking for you. The photographer wants to take family pictures by the fountain." Sophia nodded but didn't move. "Mrs. Chen, I didn't know your son played piano." The housekeeper's expression changed subtly, a mixture of pride and wariness crossing her features. "Elijah enjoys music," she said carefully. "He's incredible," Sophia said. "Where did he learn to play like that?" Mrs. Chen hesitated before answering. "He taught himself mostly. He's always had a good ear." "Self-taught?" Sophia couldn't hide her disbelief. "That's impossible." "The piece he played." "Professional pianists spend years mastering Debussy." A small, proud smile tugged at Mrs. Chen's lips. "My son has a gift, but we should not discuss this now." "Your father is waiting." Sophia followed Mrs. Chen out of the music room, but her mind was racing. She had grown up with every advantage. Private music lessons since age 5, the best teachers money could buy, and she had abandoned piano after 3 years, declaring it boring. Yet here was a boy who had somehow taught himself to play at a level that seemed impossible. The next morning, while most of the household was still recovering from the previous night's festivities, Sophia found herself wandering the grounds in search of Elijah. She finally spotted him helping the gardener load leftover party decorations into a truck. She waited until he was alone before approaching. "I want to talk to you about last night." Elijah straightened up, wiping his hands on his jeans. He looked different in daylight, dressed in regular clothes rather than the formal staff uniform. More like a normal teenager and less like someone who worked for her family. "There's nothing to talk about," he said, not quite meeting her eyes. "You're joking, right?" Sophia crossed her arms. "You played Debussy perfectly, then ran off before I could even process what happened. Where did you learn to play like that?" Elijah glanced around as if worried someone might overhear. "I just pick things up by ear. It's not a big deal." "Not a big deal?" Sophia shook her head in disbelief. Do you have any idea how talented you are? A flash of something, annoyance perhaps, crossed his face. Why do you care? Was it not entertaining enough for you to watch the help play your piano? His words stung, partly because there was truth in them. Hadn't she initially asked him to play for her amusement, expecting him to fumble through a simple tune she could laugh about later with her friends? That's not fair, she said, though perhaps it was. I'm trying to understand how someone with your level of talent isn't studying at a music conservatory or something. Elijah laughed, but there was no humor in it. Do you have any idea how much it costs to attend places like that? Or how competitive they are? He shook his head. Not everyone gets handed opportunities because of their last name, Miss Harrington. Before she could respond, he turned and walked away, leaving Sophia standing alone with an unfamiliar feeling in her chest. It took her a moment to recognize it as shame. That evening, instead of joining her father for dinner, Sophia claimed a headache and retreated to her room. She opened her laptop and began searching for information about piano prodigies, music schools, and scholarship programs. The more she read, the more she understood just how extraordinary Elijah's talent must be, and how many barriers stood between him and the kind of education that could nurture that talent. A soft knock interrupted her research. Miss Sophia? Mrs. Chen's voice came through the door. I've brought you some tea for your headache. Come in, Sophia called, closing her laptop as the housekeeper entered with a tray. Mrs. Chen set the tea on the bedside table, but instead of leaving immediately as she usually would, she hesitated. My son told me you spoke with him today. Sophia nodded. I did. Mrs. Chen, why didn't you ever tell anyone about Elijah's talent? The older woman sighed, smoothing her apron with practiced hands. Who would I tell, Miss Sophia? And what would it change? He could apply to music schools. There are scholarships. We have tried, Mrs. Chen interrupted gently. 2 years ago, when Elijah was 14, a teacher at his school heard him play at a talent show. She helped us apply to a summer program at Curtis Institute. What happened? He was invited to audition. I took an extra cleaning job to pay for the application fee and to buy him a proper suit. A sad smile crossed her face. The judges were very impressed. They said he had remarkable natural ability. So they accepted him? Sophia leaned forward eagerly. Mrs. Chen shook her head. They said his technique was undisciplined, that without proper training, he had developed bad habits that would be difficult to correct. They suggested private lessons with a professional teacher to prepare him for future auditions. She spread her hands in a helpless gesture. Such lessons cost more than I make in a month. Sophia felt a knot form in her stomach. It had never occurred to her that talent alone might not be enough. That opportunity was a privilege not everyone had access to. Where does he practice? She asked suddenly. I've never heard anyone playing the piano here except during parties when we hire musicians. He doesn't practice here, Mrs. Chen said. We have a small keyboard in our apartment, and sometimes when your family is away, I let him use the piano here. Just for an hour or two. She looked down. I hope that doesn't upset you. No, of course not, Sophia said quickly. But a keyboard isn't the same as a real piano. It is what we can afford, Mrs. Chen said simply. Elijah understands this. After Mrs. Chen left, Sophia lay awake thinking about Elijah's words. Not everyone gets handed opportunities because of their last name. The unfairness of it struck her deeply for perhaps the first time in her life. The next morning, Sophia woke with determination. She dressed quickly and went in search of her father, finding him in his home office reviewing documents. Dad, I need to talk to you about something important. Richard Harrington glanced up, distracted. Can it wait, sweetheart? I'm preparing for a board meeting. It's about the piano in the music room, Sophia pressed on. Nobody ever uses it. Mom's been gone for years and I stopped taking lessons ages ago. Her father removed his reading glasses with a sigh. What about it? I think someone should be using it. Someone with actual talent. And who might that be? He asked, his attention still half on the documents before him. Mrs. Chen's son, Elijah. He's incredible, Dad. I heard him play and he's better than most of the pianists we've hired for parties, but he has nowhere to practice properly. Her father frowned. You want to let the housekeeper's boy use your mother's piano? Yes, Sophia said firmly. And more than that, I want to help him get proper lessons. For the first time, her father gave her his full attention. This sounds like one of your impulsive ideas, Sophia. Remember the time you wanted to start a fashion line? Or become a professional photographer. How long did those interests last? Sophia felt her cheeks flush. This isn't about me. It's about not wasting an extraordinary talent just because someone was born into the wrong family. Her father studied her for a long moment. This matters to you. It wasn't a question, but Sophia answered anyway. Yes, it does. Richard Harrington nodded slowly. Then arrange for an audition. If the boy is as talented as you claim, we'll discuss next steps. Sophia felt a surge of excitement. Really? You'll help him? I didn't say that, her father cautioned. I said we'll discuss it. First, I want to hear him play myself, and then have him evaluated by someone who actually knows what they're talking about. He put his glasses back on. Now, if there's nothing else. Sophia practically ran from her father's office, eager to find Elijah and share the news. She had no idea if he would accept their help or how he might react to her interference in his life. But for the first time in longer than she could remember, Sophia felt genuinely excited about something that had nothing to do with her own comfort or pleasure. Maybe, just maybe, she could make a real difference in someone's life, and perhaps in the process find something meaningful in her own. Finding Elijah proved more difficult than Sophia had anticipated. He wasn't working on the grounds that day, and Mrs. Chen politely informed her that her son had classes at the community college where he was taking summer courses. What's he studying? Sophia asked, realizing how little she knew about him beyond his musical ability. Computer science. Mrs. Chen replied with a small smile. He is very practical. He says music doesn't pay bills. The words stung Sophia more than they should have. She had never once in her life worried about paying bills. When will he be back? I need to talk to him about something important. Mrs. Chen gave her a knowing look. He will be home around 6. But Miss Sophia... She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. My son is very proud. Sometimes too proud. Sophia nodded, understanding the gentle warning. I'll keep that in mind. The hours crawled by as Sophia waited, unaccustomed to feeling anxious about talking to someone. She usually moved through social interactions with the easy confidence of someone who had never been denied anything important. But this felt different. More significant somehow. At 6:30, she spotted Elijah walking up the long driveway that led to the staff quarters, a separate building behind the main house that Sophia had rarely given any thought to. She hurried to intercept him. Elijah, she called out. Do you have a minute? He stopped, looking surprised to see her. He carried a backpack slung over one shoulder and had headphones around his neck. For a moment, he looked like any ordinary college student. I guess, he said cautiously. Sophia took a deep breath. I talked to my dad about you. His expression immediately closed off. About me? Why would you do that? Because you're talented, she said. Really talented. And I thought maybe we could help. Help, he repeated flatly. The billionaire's daughter wants to help the poor servant boy. How generous. His sarcasm caught her off guard. That's not fair. I'm just trying to... To what? Elijah interrupted. Feel good about yourself? Add a charity case to your college application? No. Sophia felt her cheeks flush with anger and embarrassment. To make sure an amazing talent doesn't go to waste because of circumstances. My circumstances are none of your business, he said, his voice tight. I don't need your pity or your help. It's not pity, Sophia insisted. My dad wants to hear you play. If he likes what he hears, he might be willing to help with lessons or applications to music schools. Isn't that what you want? For a brief moment, Elijah's mask slipped, and Sophia caught a glimpse of longing in his eyes before he hid it away again. What I want, he said carefully, is to be taken seriously as a person, not as some interesting project for rich people to feel good about helping. Sophia felt as if she'd been slapped. That's not what this is, isn't it? Would you be this interested if I wasn't your housekeeper's son, if I was just some regular guy who happened to play piano well? The question hung between them, uncomfortable and pointed. Sophia didn't have an answer that wouldn't sound hollow. Just think about it, she said finally. My dad can open doors that might otherwise stay closed. That's not charity, it's just reality. Elijah adjusted his backpack, looking tired suddenly. I have to go. My mom's waiting for me. Please, Sophia said, feeling desperate suddenly. Just come play for him one time. If you never want anything to do with us after that, fine. He studied her face for a long moment as if trying to read her true intentions. I'll think about it, he said finally, then walked past her toward the staff quarters. Sophia watched him go, feeling strangely deflated. She had expected gratitude, maybe excitement, not this wall of pride and suspicion. But something in his final response gave her hope. "I'll think about it" wasn't a no. That night at dinner, her father asked about the piano boy, as he called Elijah. "Is he going to audition for us or not?" Sophia pushed her food around her plate. "I don't know yet. He's thinking about it." Richard Harrington raised an eyebrow. "Thinking about it? Most people would jump at an opportunity like this." "He's not most people," Sophia replied, surprised by the defensive note in her voice. "And I think he's worried about being treated like a charity case." Her father set down his fork. "Sophia, I'm willing to hear this boy play because you seem genuinely impressed by his talent. But I'm not running a music scholarship program. If he doesn't want help, that's his choice." "I know," Sophia said quickly. "Just, if he does agree, promise you'll listen with an open mind, not just as my dad doing me a favor, but as someone who might actually be able to help him." Richard studied his daughter with newfound interest. "This really matters to you, doesn't it?" "Yes," Sophia admitted. "It does." Her father nodded slowly. "Then I'll give him a fair hearing. But Sophia, don't get too invested in other people's dreams. Sometimes the best intentions can do more harm than good." 3 days passed with no word from Elijah. Sophia found herself lingering near the staff quarters, hoping to run into him, but he seemed to be deliberately avoiding the main house. She wondered if she had pushed too hard, if her privilege had blinded her to how her offer might look from his perspective. On the 4th day, she decided to try a different approach. She asked Mrs. Chen for permission to visit their apartment after her shift ended. "I just want to talk to him," Sophia explained. "I think I might have come across the wrong way before." Mrs. Chen looked uncertain. "Our home is very small, Miss Sophia. Not what you're used to." "I don't care about that," Sophia said honestly. "Please?" Eventually, Mrs. Chen agreed, and that evening Sophia followed her to the staff quarters for the first time in her life. The building was plain but well-maintained, with several apartment units for the live-in staff. Mrs. Chen and Elijah lived in a 2-bedroom unit on the ground floor. Stepping inside, Sophia was struck not by how small it was, though it was indeed tiny compared to what she was used to, but by how much it felt like a real home. There were photos on the walls, books stacked on shelves, and the faint smell of something delicious coming from the kitchen. It felt lived in and warm in a way her family's mansion never did. In the corner of the living room sat a basic electronic keyboard on a folding stand. It looked cheap and plastic next to the memory of the gleaming Steinway in the music room. "Elijah," Mrs. Chen called out. "We have a visitor." He emerged from the hallway, stopping short when he saw Sophia. He wore a faded t-shirt and sweatpants, his hair slightly damp as if he'd just showered. "What are you doing here?" he asked, not rudely but with genuine surprise. "I wanted to apologize," Sophia said simply, "and to listen." Mrs. Chen quietly excused herself to the kitchen, leaving them alone. Elijah gestured awkwardly to the small sofa. "You can sit if you want." Sophia sat, feeling strangely nervous. "I didn't think about how my offer would sound to you. I just got excited about your talent and wanted to help. But I understand why it felt condescending." Elijah sat in the chair across from her, studying her face. "Why do you care so much? You barely know me." It was a fair question, one Sophia had been asking herself. "Because when I heard you play, it was the first time in ages I felt genuinely moved by something. And because it seems unfair that someone with your gift doesn't have the chance to develop it fully." "Life isn't fair," Elijah said, but without bitterness. "Some people are born with everything, some with nothing." "I know, and I can't fix that," Sophia admitted. "But maybe in this one case I can help balance the scales a little. Not because I pity you or because I want to feel good about myself, but because music like yours deserves to be heard." For the first time, Elijah seemed to really listen to her words. He was quiet for a long moment before he spoke again. "Can I show you something?" he asked finally. Sophia nodded, and he went to a shelf, pulling down a battered laptop. He opened it and pulled up a video. "This is Vladimir Horowitz playing Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 3, he explained, pressing play. "I was 10 when I first saw this. My elementary school took us on a field trip to the library, and I found it on one of their computers." Sophia watched as the legendary pianist's hands flew across the keys with impossible speed and precision. The music was complex and beautiful, even through the laptop's tinny speakers. I couldn't stop thinking about it, Elijah continued, his voice soft with memory. I'd never heard anything like it before. I begged my mom for piano lessons, but he trailed off, then shrugged. So I checked out books about music theory from the library. I practiced finger exercises on tabletops. When Mom got me this keyboard for Christmas a few years ago, I nearly wore it out. He closed the laptop. I practice whenever I can. Sometimes at school, sometimes here. And yes, sometimes on your piano when no one's home. He gave her a slightly guilty look. Your housekeeper's son has been sneaking into your music room for years. Instead of being angry, Sophia felt her heart break a little. All that time teaching yourself. That's incredible. Elijah looked down at his hands. Pianist's hands, she realized now, with long fingers and a graceful strength to them. I'll play for your father, he said finally. Not because I want charity, but because I'd be stupid to turn down any chance, however small, to do what I love. Sophia felt a rush of relief and excitement. Really? That's great. When? Tomorrow evening? He suggested. After my classes. And Sophia, he hesitated. Thank you for coming here. For seeing where I live. Most people in your position wouldn't have bothered. His words made her uncomfortable, partly because she suspected they were true. A week ago, she wouldn't have thought twice about the lives of the people who worked for her family. I'm learning, she said simply. As she left the staff quarters that evening, Sophia felt a strange mix of emotions. She was excited about Elijah's audition, nervous about her father's reaction, and unsettled by her growing awareness of the invisible barriers that separated her world from Elijah's. But mostly, she felt a sense of purpose that had been missing from her life for as long as she could remember. For once, this wasn't about her, and somehow that made it matter more than anything had in a very long time. The next day dragged on endlessly for Sophia. She changed outfits 3 times, though she couldn't explain why she cared so much about how she looked for Elijah's audition. She rearranged the furniture in the music room, pushing the grand piano to the center where the light from the tall windows would fall perfectly across the keys. She even asked the kitchen staff to prepare light refreshments, as if they were hosting a formal recital rather than a private audition. You seem nervous, her father observed when he returned from the office. I don't think I've seen you this invested in anything since you were determined to win that horseback riding competition when you were 12. Sophia brushed a non-existent piece of lint from her dress. I just want everything to be perfect. This is important. Richard Harrington checked his watch. I've set aside an hour for this. I hope your piano prodigy appreciates the value of my time. Dad, Sophia said, a warning in her voice. Please don't call him that. His name is Elijah. Her father raised an eyebrow but nodded. Point taken. At precisely 7 o'clock, Mrs. Chen arrived with Elijah. Sophia had to stop herself from rushing forward when they entered the music room. Elijah wore a button-up shirt and khaki pants. Clearly his best clothes, though they were a far cry from the designer outfits that filled Sophia's closet. He looked nervous but determined, his eyes immediately drawn to the piano. Mr. Harrington, Mrs. Chen said formally, thank you for this opportunity. Richard nodded politely. Mrs. Chen, and this must be your son. Elijah Chen, sir. Elijah stepped forward, extending his hand. Thank you for taking the time to hear me play. Sophia watched her father's face carefully as he shook Elijah's hand. She knew that Richard Harrington was a shrewd judge of character. It was part of what made him so successful in business. She could tell he was already evaluating Elijah, noting his firm handshake and direct gaze. Sophia speaks very highly of your abilities, her father said. I admit I'm curious to hear for myself. I hope I don't disappoint, Elijah said, and Sophia could hear the slight tremor in his voice despite his effort to appear confident. Why don't we all sit down? Sophia suggested, gesturing to the seating area she had arranged near the piano. Elijah, would you like something to drink before you play? He shook his head. I'm fine, thank you. There was an awkward moment of silence as everyone took their seats. Sophia wished she had thought to invite someone else, perhaps a few family friends or her father's music-loving colleagues. The small audience made the setting feel more intimate but also more intense. Before I play, Elijah said suddenly, I'd like to explain something. He looked directly at Richard Harrington. I'm not here because I expect anything from you, sir. I'm here because I love music, and because your daughter thought you might appreciate hearing me play. Sophia held her breath, worried that her father might take offense at Elijah's directness. But to her surprise, Richard nodded, a flicker of respect crossing his face. "That's fair," he said, "and refreshingly honest. Please, whenever you're ready." Elijah moved to the piano, adjusting the bench with practiced ease. He sat for a moment, hands hovering above the keys, eyes closed as if centering himself. Sophia found herself holding her breath. When he began to play, it was not with the gentle notes of Debussy that Sophia had heard before. Instead, the powerful opening chords of Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata filled the room. But not the familiar first movement that everyone recognized. This was the rarely played third movement, a furious, technically demanding piece that showcased Elijah's remarkable dexterity. His hands flew across the keys with astonishing speed and precision. There was raw emotion in his playing, passion, yearning, and perhaps a touch of defiance. This wasn't the polite performance of someone hoping to impress. It was the honest expression of a true musician. Sophia glanced at her father and saw him sitting perfectly still, his usual mask of polite interest replaced by genuine surprise. Mrs. Chen watched her son with quiet pride, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. When Elijah finished the Beethoven piece, he transitioned without pause into something entirely different, a haunting melody that Sophia didn't recognize. It was contemporary but with classical influences, the notes weaving together to create something both melancholy and beautiful. "What is that piece?" Richard asked quietly, leaning toward Sophia. "I don't know," she whispered back, equally captivated. When the final notes faded, Elijah's hands remained on the keys for a moment before he slowly lowered them to his lap. The room was completely silent. "That last piece," Richard said finally. "I don't believe I'm familiar with it." Elijah turned on the bench to face them, a slight flush on his cheeks. "It's something I wrote," he admitted. "Just a simple composition I've been working on." "You wrote that?" Sophia couldn't keep the astonishment from her voice. "It's beautiful." "Indeed," her father agreed, his expression thoughtful. "You have impressive technical skills, young man. But more importantly, you have something to say through your music. That's much rarer." Elijah nodded, accepting the compliment with quiet dignity. "Thank you, sir. How long have you been composing?" Richard asked. "A few years," Elijah replied. "Mostly just for myself. I don't have any formal training in composition." "Which makes it all the more remarkable," Richard said. He turned to Mrs. Chen. "Your son has a genuine gift." Mrs. Chen smiled, her eyes shining with pride. "Thank you, Mr. Harrington. The question is," Richard continued, turning back to Elijah, "what do you want to do with this gift?" "Sophia mentioned music schools, but I'd like to hear from you directly." Elijah took a deep breath. "Honestly, I'd love to study at a conservatory. Juilliard, Curtis, Berkeley, any of them would be a dream. But those dreams cost money, and even with scholarships, there are expenses beyond tuition. That's why I'm studying computer science at community college. It's practical." "Practical," Richard repeated as if testing the word. "Yes, I suppose it is." He was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Do you think Mozart worried about being practical? Or Beethoven? Or any of the great composers and musicians throughout history?" Elijah met his gaze steadily. "With respect, sir, Mozart had wealthy patrons. Beethoven didn't have to worry about student loans or whether he could afford an apartment in New York City." Sophia stifled a surprised laugh. No one spoke to her father so directly, especially not someone asking for his help. To her amazement, Richard Harrington laughed, a genuine laugh that Sophia rarely heard. "Fair point," he conceded. "The arts have always required patronage." He stood up, straightening his suit jacket. "I'd like to make a proposal, if I may." Elijah stood as well, his expression cautious. "What kind of proposal?" "I have a friend, David Reynolds. He teaches at the Philadelphia Conservatory of Music and is one of the finest piano instructors on the East Coast. I'd like him to hear you play and assess your potential." Elijah's eyes widened slightly. "Professor Reynolds. I've read articles about him. If David believes you have what it takes, and based on what I just heard, I suspect he will, I'd be willing to sponsor your training with him." Mrs. Chen gasped softly. "Mr. Harrington, that's incredibly generous." Richard held up a hand. "This isn't charity," he said, glancing at Sophia with a knowing look. "Consider it an investment in talent. The arts need support, and businesses like mine benefit from cultural enrichment." He turned back to Elijah. "In return, I'd ask only that you commit fully to your musical development." Elijah stood very still, his expression conflicted. I don't know what to say. Say you'll meet with David, Richard suggested. After that we can discuss details. Sophia held her breath, watching Elijah's face. She could see the battle happening behind his eyes. Pride versus opportunity. Independence versus the chance to pursue his passion. I'd like to meet with Professor Reynolds, he said finally. Thank you. Richard nodded, satisfied. I'll make the arrangements. He checked his watch. Now if you'll excuse me, I have some calls to make. He shook Elijah's hand again. You have exceptional talent, young man. Don't waste it. After Richard left, Mrs. Chen embraced her son, tears in her eyes. I'm so proud of you, she whispered. Sophia stood awkwardly to the side, feeling both elated and somehow excluded from their moment. She had helped make this happen, but now she wondered what her role would be going forward. Elijah turned to her, his expression unreadable. Thank you, he said simply, for believing in me enough to push for this. I didn't do much, Sophia said truthfully. Your talent speaks for itself. Mrs. Chen touched her arm gently. You did more than you know, Miss Sophia. Sometimes opportunity needs a door opened before talent can walk through. After they left, Sophia remained in the music room, running her fingers lightly over the piano keys. Something had shifted tonight, but she wasn't sure exactly what. She had expected to feel triumphant, pleased with herself for helping someone less fortunate. Instead, she felt humbled by Elijah's dignity and talent, and vaguely ashamed of her initial patronizing attitude. 3 days later, Elijah met with Professor Reynolds in the same music room. Sophia wasn't invited to attend, but her father told her later that the professor had been extremely impressed and had agreed to take Elijah on as a student starting immediately. He said something interesting. Richard mentioned over dinner. He said Elijah has the technical skill of someone who's been playing for decades, but the emotional rawness of someone who hasn't been trained to follow rigid classical interpretation. It gives his playing a unique quality that can't be taught. So what happens now? Sophia asked. Lessons begin next week. 3 times a week with Reynolds, plus daily practice time. I've told Mrs. Chen that Elijah is welcome to use the piano here whenever he needs to. And his college classes? He's finishing the summer session, but we've agreed he'll focus solely on music for the next year, then reassess. If things go as well as Reynolds expects, he'll be ready to audition for top conservatories by next spring. Sophia nodded, feeling a complicated mix of emotions. She was genuinely happy for Elijah, but also strangely sad. Now that her father had taken over arrangements, she wasn't sure where she fit into the story anymore. Have you spoken to him since the audition? Her father asked, seeming to read her thoughts. No, she admitted. I didn't want to intrude. Richard studied his daughter thoughtfully. You know, Sophia, in business we often talk about recognizing potential and nurturing talent, but it takes a certain kind of person to see value where others don't look. He smiled slightly. I'm proud of you for bringing Elijah to my attention. His words warmed her but didn't quite fill the hollow feeling in her chest. She had helped open a door for Elijah, yes, but now he was walking through it, moving forward on a path that likely wouldn't include her. That evening, as she walked past the music room, Sophia heard the piano being played. She paused outside the door, listening to a melody she didn't recognize, something complex and beautiful that made her heart ache in a way she couldn't explain. She turned the doorknob quietly, slipping into the room without disturbing the player. Elijah sat at the piano, lost in the music he was creating. He hadn't noticed her enter. And for a moment, Sophia simply watched him, struck by how transformed he looked when he played. Confident, passionate, completely himself. This was who he was meant to be, she realized. Not a housekeeper's son or a charity case, but an artist finding his voice. The thought brought both joy and a strange, unexpected sadness as she realized their worlds, which had briefly intersected, would soon likely diverge again. Summer faded into fall, and Sophia left for Yale. College life consumed her, new classes, new friends, new experiences that pushed the memory of Elijah and his music to the back of her mind. She called home occasionally, chatting with her father about business and campus life, but never asking about Elijah. Something held her back, a strange reluctance she couldn't quite name. During Thanksgiving break, she returned to find the mansion decorated for the holidays, the staff busy preparing for the annual Harrington Christmas Charity Gala. It felt both familiar and strange to be back, as if she had outgrown the place somehow. On her second evening home, Sophia wandered to the music room out of habit. The door was partially open, warm light spilling into the hallway. She heard voices, her father's and another she didn't recognize, and was about to turn away when she caught a few words that made her pause. "The progress he's made in just 4 months is extraordinary," the unfamiliar voice was saying. "I've never seen anything like it." Curious, Sophia pushed the door open wider. Her father sat in one of the armchairs speaking with an older man with silver hair, who she guessed must be Professor Reynolds. "Sophia," her father said, noticing her in the doorway. "Come in. Professor Reynolds was just updating me on Elijah's progress." "Miss Harrington," the professor stood to greet her. "A pleasure to meet you. Your father tells me you were the one who discovered our young prodigy." Sophia smiled awkwardly. "I wouldn't say I discovered him. I just happened to hear him play. Well, however it happened, we owe you a debt of gratitude. Talent like his shouldn't remain hidden. How is he doing?" Sophia asked, trying to sound casual. "Remarkably well," Professor Reynolds replied, his eyes lighting up with genuine enthusiasm. "He's absorbing everything I teach him at an astonishing rate. Technical skills that take most students years to master, he picks up in weeks. But more importantly, he hasn't lost that raw emotional quality that makes his playing so compelling." "That's wonderful," Sophia said, meaning it despite the strange, hollow feeling in her chest. "We've already begun preparing his audition pieces for Juilliard and Curtis," the professor continued. "I've spoken with colleagues at both institutions. They're very interested in hearing him play." "So soon?" Sophia looked at her father in surprise. Richard nodded. "David believes Elijah will be ready for auditions in February. And after that?" Sophia asked. "If all goes well, and I have every reason to believe it will, he'll be offered a place at one of the top conservatories in the country," Professor Reynolds said confidently. "With your father's generous sponsorship to cover expenses, of course." "I see," Sophia said, unsure why this information made her feel so conflicted. Wasn't this exactly what she had hoped for when she first approached her father about Elijah? That's great news. Actually," her father said, checking his watch, "Elijah should be arriving shortly. He's performing a short piece at the charity gala this weekend, and we're having a final rehearsal tonight. Would you like to stay and hear him play?" The thought of seeing Elijah again after months away made Sophia unexpectedly nervous. "I don't want to intrude on his rehearsal." "Nonsense," Professor Reynolds said. "I'm sure he'd be pleased to see you. After all, none of this would have happened without your intervention." Before Sophia could make her escape, the door opened and Elijah walked in. He looked different, more confident, his posture straighter, his clothes more polished. He carried a leather portfolio case that she guessed contained sheet music. He stopped short when he saw her. "Sophia, you're home." "Just for Thanksgiving break," she said, suddenly aware of how awkward she felt. "I heard you're playing at the gala," Elijah nodded. "Your father invited me to perform." An uncomfortable silence fell between them, filled with unspoken words. Professor Reynolds cleared his throat. "Well, shall we begin? I think we should run through the Chopin first, then your original composition." "You're performing one of your own pieces?" Sophia asked, surprised. A flicker of the old shyness crossed Elijah's face. "Just a short one." Professor Reynolds thought it would make the program more unique. "It's exceptional work," the professor added. "Especially for someone with no formal composition training." Sophia moved to leave. "I should let you rehearse. You can stay," Elijah said quickly. "If you want to, I mean." Something in his voice made her pause. "Are you sure?" He nodded, and Sophia settled into a chair near the back of the room, watching as Elijah took his place at the piano. As he began to play, she was struck by how much his technique had improved. His already impressive skill had been refined. His movements more economical, yet somehow more expressive. When he finished the Chopin piece, Professor Reynolds offered a few minor critiques, which Elijah absorbed with focused attention. Then he moved on to his original composition, the same haunting melody Sophia had heard him playing before she left for college, but now expanded and developed into something even more beautiful. After the rehearsal ended, Professor Reynolds and her father stepped out to discuss some logistical details for the gala, leaving Sophia and Elijah alone in the music room. "That was beautiful," she said softly. "Your composition, I mean. Does it have a name?" Elijah hesitated. "I call it Open Doors," he said. not quite meeting her eyes. The title made Sophia's heart skip a beat. That's fitting. How's Yale? He asked, changing the subject. It's good. Challenging, different. She paused. How have you been? Besides the obvious musical success, I mean. Busy, he admitted. Professor Reynolds is demanding, but in the best way. And your father has been incredibly generous. Not just with money, but with connections, opportunities. He trailed off, looking uncomfortable. I'm glad, Sophia said, and meant it despite the complicated feelings churning inside her. You deserve all of it. I wouldn't have any of it without you, Elijah said quietly. I never properly thanked you for that. Sophia shook her head. You don't need to thank me. Your talent did all the work. I just noticed it. No, Elijah insisted. What you did was more than that. You saw something in me that I wasn't sure was real. You made me believe it might be possible to pursue this dream. His words touched something deep inside her. I think I needed to see it too, she admitted. That talent and passion exist in places I'd never bothered to look before. They fell silent again, but it was a different kind of silence now, thoughtful rather than awkward. Will you be at the gala? Elijah asked finally. Of course. I wouldn't miss your performance. He smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him since returning home. Good. There's something I want you to hear. The night of the charity gala arrived, the Harrington mansion transformed into a winter wonderland of twinkling lights and elegant decorations. Hundreds of guests in formal attire mingled throughout the ground floor, sipping champagne and bidding on silent auction items that would benefit various children's charities. Sophia wore a simple blue gown, mingling with her father's business associates and her mother's old friends, who inevitably commented on how grown-up she looked now. She smiled and made polite conversation, but her mind was elsewhere, counting the minutes until Elijah's performance. At 9 o'clock, her father took to the small stage that had been set up in the grand ballroom. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for your generosity tonight. Before we announce the auction winners, I have a special treat for you. It is my privilege to introduce a remarkable young pianist, who I believe you'll be hearing much more from in the years to come. Please welcome Elijah Chen. The polite applause that greeted Elijah as he walked to the piano was nothing compared to the enthusiastic ovation that erupted after his performance of the Chopin piece. The wealthy, cultured audience recognized exceptional talent when they heard it, and Elijah had delivered a flawless performance. When the applause died down, Elijah spoke for the first time, his voice clear and confident. Thank you. For my final piece tonight, I'd like to play an original composition. I wrote this over the past few months, inspired by someone who taught me that sometimes opportunities appear in the most unexpected places. This piece is called The Gift, and it's dedicated to Sophia Harrington. Sophia felt her cheeks flush as several hundred pairs of eyes turned to find her in the crowd. She hadn't expected this public acknowledgement, this visible connection between them. As Elijah began to play, she recognized elements of open doors but transformed into something new, more complex, more hopeful. The melody spoke of barriers overcome, of two different worlds finding unexpected harmony. It was, she realized, the story of their unlikely friendship translated into music. When he finished, the room erupted in applause once more. Sophia found herself wiping away unexpected tears, moved beyond words by the gift he had given her. Later, after the gala had ended and most guests had departed, Sophia found Elijah in the music room, putting away his sheet music. That was incredible, she said from the doorway. I don't know what to say. He looked up, a smile spreading across his face. You don't have to say anything. I wanted to thank you properly in the only way that felt right. By embarrassing me in front of hundreds of people, she teased, but her voice was gentle. By acknowledging the truth, he corrected, that none of this would have happened without you. Sophia shook her head. Your talent would have found a way eventually. Maybe. But thanks to you, I didn't have to wait. You saw me, Sophia. Really saw me when I was invisible to everyone else. The simple truth of his words touched her deeply. I think we saw each other, she said quietly. You showed me a world beyond my privilege, beyond the narrow life I was living. Elijah nodded, understanding in his eyes. So what happens now? You become a famous pianist, Sophia said with a small smile. You get into Juilliard or Curtis and you share your gift with the world. And you? I'll be cheering you on from Yale. Maybe majoring in something useful like arts advocacy or nonprofit management. instead of the business degree my father wants." Elijah laughed. "He might forgive you eventually." "I think he already knows," Sophia admitted. "He said something about recognizing potential and nurturing talent. I think he was talking about more than just your piano playing." They fell silent, the future stretching before them with all its possibilities and uncertainties. "Will you keep in touch?" Elijah asked finally. "When you go back to Yale and wherever your music takes you," Sophia finished for him. "Yes, I'd like that." She extended her hand, but Elijah surprised her by pulling her into a quick hug instead. "Thank you," he whispered, "for everything." As Sophia walked back to her room that night, she thought about the girl she had been just a few months ago, privileged, sheltered, seeing the world through a narrow lens of wealth and status. She thought about the boy who had been invisible to her until music had revealed his true self. They had both been transformed by this unexpected intersection of their lives. Elijah had gained opportunity and recognition for his extraordinary talent, and Sophia had gained something perhaps even more valuable, a wider vision of the world and her place in it, an understanding that true worth had nothing to do with wealth or social standing. The billionaire's daughter and the servant's son had started as characters in what could have been a patronizing tale of charity. Instead, they had become something much more meaningful to each other, catalysts for change, witnesses to each other's true potential, and perhaps in their own unexpected way, friends. As she drifted off to sleep, Sophia could still hear the notes of Elijah's composition echoing in her mind. A beautiful reminder that the most valuable gifts are those that transform us, opening doors we never knew existed and leading us to versions of ourselves we might never otherwise have discovered.